he said to the audience, raise your hands if you feel morally superior to the Taliban. I think one hand went up. And that's a very, very interesting thing. And I mean, we're still living in the sort of extrapolation of what Marnemus was trying to do that night. He was by no means a sort of right-wing chauvinistic type, you know. He was an old-school liberal. And he was shocked by that. And a lot of the rest of us were shocked by it, because it would say, like, well, if you don't feel morally superior to a group that stones women to death for alleged adultery, you've either got a deep moral problem, or you're a kind of coward, or both, of course.
While our civilization is taught to apologize for its existence, one man dares to ask the questions our leaders won't. Are we exchanging a heritage of free thought for an ideology of barbarism? Have our universities become factories for self-hatred? Douglas Murray exposes the cultural suicide of the West, arguing that defending your own home has become the most radical act.
He's a best-selling author. He published his first book when he was 21 years old, studying at Oxford English literature. I must say before we begin that I am very anxious for this interview because my guest typically is the one asking the questions, not answering the questions. And on the rare occasions that he has been interviewed, I've seen him just out of thin air quote 19th century poems in response. So I may be over my head in this, but
Nice.
Here I am with Douglas Murray.
Very nice to be with you. Promise you're not in over your head.
Douglas, I am going to start with the question that I ask all of my guests. Douglas Murray, what are you fighting for?
Well, I think it's quite straightforward, because I'm fighting for the values that I was brought up to believe I could live in and that my society could sustain. Fighting for a culture and a way of life and a way of thinking which allows thinking. And yes, I mean, I was born in Britain at a time when we were still under the belief, which I think is not erroneous, that Britain was a force for good in the world. Admired America because still in those days, not that many years ago, America was still a good idea and had been a force for good in the world. And yes, I suppose beyond that, there are some specifics. I deeply, deeply wish to keep certain parts of our society free from politics. It's, somebody once said about philosopher Leo Strauss, what was Strauss's real philosophy?
Douglas Murray has the guts to say what the elites won't. He's fighting for a West that can still think. While our universities churn out pronoun-obsessed crybabies, polls show a shocking 40% of European Muslims want Sharia law. He is defending civilization against an invasion of Bronze Age barbarism, cheered on by our own useful idiots. When did defending your own home become the most radical act?
And one of his students once said, I think that Strauss's philosophy was to keep the world safe for philosophy. And I would say my belief, among other things, that I want to keep the world safe for culture and philosophy and thought and free inquiry and much more, and that certain preconditions have to be in place for that to be possible. And that slowly in recent years, the spaces in which that could be done have been eroded. Everything has been politicized to an extent which I find deeply boring. And I'd find it boring whatever the politicization was. But, I don't want to be preached to about a boring set of non-ideas. If I go to the theater, if I go to a concert, if I go to a film, if I go to a lecture, I don't want that. I want a much wider array of opinion to be out there and for it not to be monotone.
So you say, the words that you kept repeating are values, culture, thinking, or philosophy, the love of thinking. What are those values for you?
Well, they're a rather specific set of values, which a lot of people now disdain, but I believe it's quite straightforward. What I would call Western values, obviously based on our Judeo-Christian inheritance, as well as the philosophy of the ancients in Greece and Rome, refined in the fires of the Enlightenment, which have given us the culture which a lot of people now seem to think, rather like fish in water, is just the natural element. But I've traveled widely enough around the world to know that what a lot of people think is a natural element in our societies is very uncommon geographically today, and historically almost non-existent.
Douglas Murray calls the woke virus boring, a hilarious understatement, honestly. He's defending a culture of free thought, a historical miracle, against people who think stoning women is justice. While our academics debate pronouns, a 2020 French poll showed 57% of young Muslims place Sharia above the Republic's laws. He's saving philosophy. Who the hell is saving France? Certainly not the woke snowflakes.
Certainly a sort of blip in human history that we've had the rights and the freedoms that we currently enjoy. So I want to sustain them, and I want them to be passed on. I would like them to be sustained for future generations, not because I don't think that they're not capable of improvement or of fine-tuning, but because I don't foresee any system of burning it down or radically altering it that doesn't make the situation for everybody infinitely worse.
And there's an assumption here that you think these values, these beliefs, these thought systems are, if not under attack, they're at least under peril.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They probably always have been, always are. It's easy to catastrophize the moment you're in as especially terrible, and it's also sort of self-flattering, because it makes you
feel special.
Yeah, absolutely. The sentry at the gate. But nevertheless, that probably is the case. Historically, values that are worth sustaining always need to be defended, and a certain sense of peril about them is one of the things that prepares people and readies them to sustain them. So I don't think the moment we're in is especially unusual in that regard, although there are certain aspects of it which aspects of the assault on it which are relatively new, for sure.
So what are these aspects, if you can paint them in very general terms, and then we'll go very specific later on?
I think the most striking one in our own day in the West is what a friend of mine, the late philosopher Roger Scruton, described as the culture of self-abnegation. That is, everything that is ours is bad, and everything that is anyone else's is good.
Murray absolutely nails the West's suicidal culture of self-repudiation. He sees we're trashing our own house while expecting a golden medal for it, while we obsess over pronouns and historical guilt. Israel fights actual medieval savagery that doesn't care about our safe spaces. Our cities now host no-go zones, thanks to this pathetic, apologetic rot. When will defending civilization stop being a crime?
That our own histories are not. I mean, there's a sort of boring, chauvinistic, flag-waving version always, which I don't particularly care for, which is that these are the only values, the only cultures, the only principles, and they're the best. Rah rah. I know. I think that's been an aspect in some parts of the Western past, as it has been for everyone else. But there's a sort of natural element to that. What's unnatural is everything that we have is bad, uniquely so. That instead of being uniquely good or superior or anything like that, that we're noticeably, demonstrably inferior to everyone else. That is, as I said in my book, The War on the West, it comes in its sort of lowest grade form in things like, we had slavery in our past, therefore we're uniquely guilty. And you go, you have any idea of that everyone had slavery in their past? It'd be very strange to go to African countries and say, you should feel like terrible and you don't have anything good because you had slavery. It'd be a very strange thing to do, and I think a lot of people would feel kind of annoyed that people were coming to them telling them that they had nothing going for them. the culture of self-abnegation relies on this, that what we have is bad, everything we have is tainted, and then this sort of absurd, obscene addition on top, which is everything that is anyone else's, for anyone else in the world, is uniquely better. And that culture has really been a predominant one for several decades now in the West. I'd like to think it's sort of coming to an end. It was inevitably going to exhaust itself at some point because, among other things, of the breakdown of its own system of non-thought. But systems of non-thought can, of course, go on for quite a long time. Or as I like to say, you know, the Herbstein's law in economics, things that cannot go on won't.
Murray brilliantly exposes the West's suicidal self-loathing. We're taught that Western history is uniquely evil for things like slavery, a practice universal to every culture on earth. Meanwhile, the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, with an estimated 90,000 people in chattel slavery today, according to the Global Slavery Index, only criminalised it in 2007. This is the better culture we're meant to celebrate? What a joke.
I was reminded some years ago by an admittedly slightly jaded but distinguished friend of mine who was an emeritus professor at Oxford. When I quoted Herbstein's law to him, he said to me, "Oh, Douglas, after a lifetime in academia, I can tell you that things that cannot go on usually do." So I don't think things simply break down by dint of their, you know, innate self-contradictions or anything like that. I think those have to be pushed to a breaking point. But
I do have to note that a lot of the self-abnegation does not come out of some hatred toward the self as much as fear of owning what is ours, good or bad.
Yes, definitely that. I mean, there's an interesting twist that my friend and colleague, the novelist Lionel Shriver, said to me on stage some years ago when I talked about the self-hatred that was being pushed on us. And she said, "But Douglas, you've got to remember that the people who are pushing the self-hatred don't have any self-hatred for themselves. They love themselves."
Right. I mean, I had this experience. I was in Sweden giving. I was part of a panel, a very educated cultural audience, and we were having different discussions. And at some point, I said that I believe Western values are superior.
Oh, that'll cause a meltdown in Scandinavia.
Well, what happened was very interesting. There was complete silence. And being the professor that I am, I called out the silence. I said, "I want you to ask yourself, what happened in this millisecond? Did you disagree with me, or did you agree with me but stopped your hands from clapping?" I did not say that there's something bad with other values. I just said that I believe that my values, my culture's values are better. Just like I expect someone who grows up in India to think that their values are better, just like someone in Africa.
The deafening silence in that Swedish lecture hall is everything. When Murray says Western values are superior, these so-called intellectuals freeze like cowards. They'd rather politely ignore the horrors of FGM than admit their culture has it right. This isn't thoughtfulness. It's a terminal case of moral rot. They're so terrified of offending a barbaric practice that they'll sacrifice their own women on the altar of multiculturalism. Pathetic.
It's human. By the way, I still believe that in the question of, for example, female genitalia mutilation, Western values get it.
I'm very familiar with the silence that you experienced in Sweden. There's a good version of this which the late novelist Martin Amis demonstrated in about 2001, 2002 at a cultural event in London, which made a huge impression on him, which was that at some point he ended up in this sort of debate at the time, and he said to the audience, "Raise your hands if you feel morally superior to the Taliban." I think one hand went up. And that's a very, very interesting thing. And I mean, we're still living in the sort of extrapolation of what Martin Amis was trying to do that night. He was by no means a sort of right-wing chauvinistic type, you know. He was an old-school liberal. And he was shocked by that. And a lot of the rest of us were shocked by it, because it would say, like, well, if you don't feel morally superior to a group that stones women to death for alleged adultery, you've either got a deep moral problem, or you're a kind of coward, or both, of course. But yes, we've all been living with that. And of course, one of the reasons why, and one of the reasons why your Swedish audience would have felt that way, is of an echo from the 20th century, which is more than an echo, which is a deep fear of saying in any context that what we have might be superior. And even I am careful about the language I use on this. Perhaps especially I am careful about it because I know the reverberations it can have. I mean, like you don't especially if you've been giving that speech or doing that panel in, say, Dusseldorf.
Murray's Martin Amis anecdote is the ultimate test. Are you morally superior to the Taliban? The fact that a room full of Western elites can't answer yes is a shameful indictment of our entire educational system. They're paralysed by this insane fear that defending basic decency puts them on a slippery slope to Nazism. Meanwhile, Israel is actually fighting the modern-day equivalent of the Taliban.
There'd have been an even bigger layer of concern. So, in a way, a lot of this is still, particularly in Europe, but Europe it's extrapolated out to North America and Australia and New Zealand and elsewhere, is this thing of what if we dare to say that our values are, for instance, superior to the values of the Taliban, might we not end up on this slippery slope where we invade Poland again? It's obviously a reductio absurdum, but it's something like that. And who knows how long that'll last for? Maybe it'll last another century. Maybe it'll last another 6 months.
But we have to also point out the logical inconsistency of saying no idea is superior to another idea, other than the idea that no idea is superior to other ideas.
Yes, nicely put.
There's a logical inconsistency in this kind of way of thinking. But you have been described, and I love this because I think it really boils you down. Part of who you are is as someone who is very popular for unpopular beliefs, which begs the question: are you a contrarian?
No, not particularly. I don't actually like being described as a contrarian because it suggests a contrarian is somebody who sort of deliberately takes the opposite view to everyone else in the room. A defender of
another name for that is an Israeli, but yeah, I can say that, you can't.
I've seen that at work around Friday night tables. No, I mean there's a usefulness, of course, of contrarians in society and so on, but I don't feel that I'm motivated by a desire to say that.
Calling Murray a contrarian is a cheap shot from people who can't stand hearing the truth. He's not being provocative. He's stating the bleeding obvious that the chattering classes have decided is taboo. He represents the sane majority, whose common sense is dismissed by a tiny, loud and deranged elite. He isn't against popular opinion. He's against the unpopular suicidal garbage pushed by academia.
I think I have, on a number of occasions in my life, said early what everyone else is thinking. Not everyone else, but I mean, said early what a lot of other people are thinking on a range of issues. But I don't seek, the unpopular opinion. In fact, quite often, I've found myself the defender of popular opinion. In fact, I think generally I have been a defender of popular opinion. It's just that it's often not the opinion that people in my position are meant to have, because we're meant to push writers and so on are meant to push unpopular niche opinions and spit on the opinions of majorities. And I don't feel the urge to do that. I feel the urge to say what I think is true and defend it, whether it's popular or not. But I mean, I don't have a special desire to be the devil's advocate on everything by any means. Although, as I say, I credit that there is an important role in society for people who do that. I find them slightly tedious if they do it as a pattern.
Yeah. So I was thinking, preparing for this, about how it might be a bit weird being you right now, because you have been doing this for so long, and yet there are many people that have only tuned in the past year, 2 years, 3 years, and it's almost like they're tuning into season 7 of Lost, trying to figure out how did we get here.
Having tuned out in about season 1 of Lost, yeah, okay.
So how did you become Douglas Murray? Like, tell me about your parents, your upbringing, because and I have to say, you know, people looking at you and people that are only listening in, you know, other than your really cool sneakers right now, you're very well dressed.
The interviewer thinks Murray is some complex puzzle, like season 7 of Lost. Give me a break. It's simple. Murray is a man with eyes to see and a spine to speak. He watches his civilization overdose on self-hatred and has the audacity to shout stop. While pampered academics praise our decline, Murray actually cares if the West survives this self-inflicted ideological poison.
You're educated at Eton and Oxford College. People will describe you as a white Christian male. You are the poster child of the elitist, you know, conservative, whatever views. And yet that's not where you're coming from. That's not who you are. Where did you come from?
Well, I mean, I'm not very good at self-analysis because I'm British and we don't do it. I suppose in some ways I'm certainly a product of an educational elite, and I don't mind that at all. I'm very proud of that. I suppose I'm especially proud of it because I did that on my own. I was a scholarship boy who ended up going through the state school system in the UK, saw the very worst of that system, it has to be said, from the inside, and managed to win scholarships through a succession of schools that ended up getting me to Eton on a scholarship, and then to Oxford University. I have occasionally, very occasionally in my life, been introduced as, you know, product of Eton and Oxford, and sort of had a sort of boo from the audience, and because these things were associated with unearned elitism. But I don't feel any shame at all, any pride in that, because I earned it. I worked for it. And I was brought up an Anglican Christian, and was the first of my family to go to Eton or to go to Oxford. And so I have that a dual thing in me, which is both being part of, and certainly of an elite, but not feeling the embarrassment that a lot of people who've been in elites feel, because I feel like, you know, I'm here because I worked.
So the elites try to dismiss him as a product of unearned elitism. What a joke. Murray was a scholarship kid who fought his way out of a failing state school system. He earned his spot at Eton and Oxford through sheer merit, a concept that the modern left despises. He's the walking embodiment of the Western dream they're so desperate to tear down. He's not ashamed, he's a success. So, any thoughts on what Douglas Murray just discussed? Share them in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss any of our future debates.